So we're actually going to head into a 4-week series, including today. And the word that came as we were just kind of praying through this year, almost like a theme word, was just the word hunger. And we could throw all kinds of different words there. The hunger was the word that came up. And really, we could say passion. We could say igniting a fire. We could say, all of these different things. But it really has to do with, like, are you excited about your walk with God? And can other people see that? And even as we talked about hunger as a team, and we're like, what we desire, because I can't teach hunger. Right? Hunger is caught, it's not taught. So I can man, I really want you to be hungry for God. And you're like, oh, yeah, all right, crickets. Yeah. And so, but what we found as we were looking at this and praying through this is that it affects every area of your walk with God. It's going to affect how you worship in this corporate setting. It's going to affect how you show up in your relationship with God in private. It's going to affect your relationships. Hunger for God is going to affect if you decide to share your faith with other people. I would imagine if you're not hungry or passionate for the Lord, you probably aren't going to be sharing that relationship with people outside of these four walls. And so throughout this year, especially and hopefully years to come, what I'd like to help with is in various ways help to encourage you to ignite a passion, a fire, grow a hunger that would permeate every aspect of your life. But how many know, first things first? Anyone love New Year's resolutions? Anyone, whenever you hear the phrase New Year's resolutions, you can want to kind of throw up in your mouth a little bit? Yep, me too. But do you know the word resolution? Even though we joke about New Year's resolution, resolution, it's part of that word resolve, where we get resolve from. If you actually had a New Year's resolution, it would mean that you have resolved in your heart that you were going to do this and there's no turning back. Well, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, Jonathan. No. My thought here is, man, a lot of times what happens with at the beginning of the year is we want to reset. And we want to make this humongous goal because we recognize something about the previous year that we didn't like about ourselves or whatever, and we want to just do different in the upcoming year. And so we're like, all right, I'm going to. And then, everyone goes out and gets health and fitness memberships, and everyone goes out and buys that monthly subscription to the new eating plan or whatever it might be. You get food in boxes now sent to your door. That's good. That's a good idea, isn't it? And I just thought, well, man, what about in our walk with God, as the series title is cultivating hunger in our walk with God? What if we didn't focus on I'm just going to be this incredible Christian? What if we just said, what's one thing I could do to push the needle forward in this year? What if instead of focusing on the man, that I get maybe you're different than me, but I get discouraged sometimes with the big picture. Sometimes I look at that and I'm like, that mountain is way too big to climb. I think I'll just camp out here. And instead of, what if I just focused on the next step? What if I focused on pushing the needle forward just a little bit? Could all of us, in fact, in this series, I would encourage you, because some of you have been walking with the Lord for a long time. Some of you probably have even better walks with God than even I do, and you could come up here and share about all that. But could I just suggest that all of us could push the needle forward a little bit? And if you think you can't, there's something wrong, right? How many know we haven't arrived yet? And that there's always room for growth, and in fact, there's always room for your walk with Him to go to another level, just like all of our earthly relationships. I've, just like some of you, I get the privilege of sitting down maybe over coffee with somebody or in the office, and we're talking about spiritual growth, or we might be talking about marriage or whatever it might be. And it's interesting because oftentimes the subjective question comes up, and it'll be like, well, how's your walk with God? And then someone answers back across the table, well, like pretty good. And then I follow up with, well, how do you know? And then we get to the brass tacks, right? Then we start to really realize what's really going on, because then they start stuttering through. Well, and then they fill in the blank with maybe I go to church at least once every 9 weeks, and I have a Bible, and look at it ever so often, and I have some Christian, you know what I'm saying? So they go through and they start listing off some of these things. Right? It's similar to when I'm sitting across the table from somebody and I say, well, how's your marriage? And they'll say, pretty good. And then I say, well, can I ask your wife? But seriously, I'll say, well, how do you know? And it's some of those same things, like there are some things that you can measure. We don't want to measure it, but man, that there's some things you can measure about your relationship with somebody in the natural. There's things that you can measure about your relationship with God, and there's a lot that's subjective, right? There's a lot that we're going to just, like, that's between you and Jesus, and when we get to heaven someday, you're going to stand before him by yourself with nobody else, and you guys are going to have a conversation, but there are some things that you can measure that indicate the needle's pointing forward in your walk with God. There's some things you can measure to indicate that the needle's pointing forward in your marriages and in any relationship that you have. Like, for instance, if I were to say, like how much time did you spend with your spouse this week, right? How much money did you spend on your spouse this week? It's a big measurement. You with me? And so over these next few weeks, we're gonna talk about a few of those things. In any relationship, it's the daily habits and routines and commitments that start to indicate if there's health there in a relationship. The series thought, if we're going to just have a thought over the next 4 weeks, here's the series thought. It's a daily walk with God cultivates hunger for God. And it's important to understand that phrase because, especially in this camp, like when I say this camp, it's like, those that are part of like a Pentecostal charismatic type of a experience, because if you're like me, man, I love going to like the services and the conferences where the worship is just like out of this world, and where there's an experience and where someone gets healed or set free, or someone's like, whoo, and they run around, maybe not to run around the sanctuary, but they do something, like there's something tangible there. I love it when there's something happening in a service and I'm experiencing, like there's something tangible and all of this stuff. Like I love going after all of those things. And yet, I have found, and maybe some of you found this, that there is a daily routine, a daily walk that sets us up for greater experiences. And it is actually a sign of immaturity in your walk with God to rely on those big experiences. And so if I'm just waiting for the next quote unquote encounter, man, like that's part of our vision for this church. If you walk in, you're going to see on the wall, encounter, grow, release. Like that's a big deal to us. But if you're only relying on the next encounter, it's actually a sign of immaturity in your walk with God. It's actually the daily stuff, the routines that set you up for greater moments and greater encounters. Man, if the only time I ever talked with Becky was on like a date night or a vacation, that we'd be in serious trouble. Same thing with my kids, right? If like, a daddy-daughter date night or a vacation, all right, you're going to see daddy in 3 months. Like that's not a great relationship. And some people, they'll come to me and they'll just say, man, I just want help, Pastor. I want to grow my walk with God. But if we're going to be honest, we don't want to put in the hard work that it takes to cultivate a relationship. Man, and what we're going to start to find is, man, there's some things in Christianity over the years where we wrestle with, and we're like, man, anybody just love just religious activity? Anyone just want to add something more religious to your life? Yeah. I mean, all the hands going up all over this place. I'm imagining people online just like, well, yes, that's me, right? Like, what about that? Anyone want to just add like another burden to your life? Like, what about like legalism? Anyone just want to add anyone want to just add another checklist to your walk with God? No, like we don't want that. And so there's this balance between the things that can be indicators that the needle's pointing forward in your walk with God, and then also like the motives behind it, the why you're doing this. I mean, Jesus spent time with a bunch of people in the Gospels that if on paper, man, they had a better walk with God than all of us. Like some of these guys, they were called Pharisees. Like they had the whole Old Testament memorized. Any of you have one book of the Bible memorized? Man, they could just on the outside, these guys looked like they had it all together. And then Jesus said, you're kind of like whitewashed tombs with dead man's bones on the inside. He's like, you guys focus so much on like cleaning the outside of the cup, but you forget the inside. You all with me? Is this all right? Okay. I think the problem is, like in our culture, we often look for the exceptional, the fireworks, the music playing softly in the background, without the everyday devotion that's needed to sustain the exceptional. The Bible talks about having a form of godliness and yet denying God's power. Any of you heard that before? There's a form of godliness yet denying the power. But it also talks about accessing the power and yet denying a godly relationship. Right? So you got both sides. You have these guys that come to Jesus in Matthew 7 and say, we've done all of these powerful things. We've done all of the laying hands on people and raising the dead and casting out demons and doing all this and healing people, which, man, any of that happening like in your small groups, right? I mean, if some of those results were happening, we'd be like, man, sign them up to be the next, elder or pastor or ministry worker. Like those are some good results. And yet Jesus looks at those guys and says, depart from me, I never knew you. We never had relationship. It's like for Jesus, it's a big deal. Hunger for God is built on the everyday. I don't know about you. I never get warm fuzzies or goosebumps when I hear the word discipline. Maybe some of you are sick. Maybe some of you are. Some of you like you eat discipline. For me, I'm like, but man, when I add discipline to my life. And somewhere in the early church, they started calling these things that could be cultivated in our life. They called them spiritual what? Disciplines. And to me, that means like because they don't come naturally. Like it could be really easy to get off course. And when I look at a group like this, and I see some really young and some not as young, and I just know that like I could assume that all of us are just growing on our walk with God and have a daily walk with Him. But man, I wouldn't be doing my job because I know that there are things that come up and get us out of routine. There are things that come up and then all of a sudden we find ourselves not where we wanted to be. And I just wanted to encourage us for a few weeks in this thought that you can do something, even a simple thing, on a regular basis to actually start to ignite hunger in your life. I've noticed this with in the natural with actually eating food, that I'm drawn to food that is not good for me. And I really, in fact, one of my favorite flavors is like a sweet and spicy flavor that comes together. I love sweet and spicy. I made some smoked barbecue ribs for Kaylee and I yesterday, and it was a sweet and spicy flavor. We enjoyed it together. But you know what about that sweet and spicy flavor? It comes with a lot of what? Yeah, a lot of sugar, a lot of stuff that is just super healthy for me and all that, right? And so I find this, that when I'm in this kick and then I'm just like, I'm going to bed at night and I'm gonna grab something. So in fact, when Becky and I first got married, she went to the store like a really good wife, right? And she did the first trip. You know that first trip that when you're like in a new place and you're getting all of the spices, you're getting all of the staples on top of, I mean, it's a hefty grocery bill. You know what I'm saying? It's going to last for a while. But she comes in very proud of herself, puts it all away, all this stuff. And I'm going through, I'm looking through all of this. I'm proud of her, except for the fact, what was the first thing I said? Where are all the sweets? Like, what about the cookies? What about the ice cream? What, no candy, nothing. Because what I do at night is man, if I'm not in a good season, I'm looking for something sweet as I'm going to bed. How many know that's like the worst time to eat something sweet? Do you know what I have found is the seasons where I have shifted into healthy eating habits, eventually I start craving those healthy things. It's a really interesting thing, like pistachios. I love pistachios when I am eating healthy. I love almonds when I'm eating healthy. I love some, in fact, I start to even crave them and think about them. It's interesting. It's similar with our walk with God. We are putting things in all the time that aren't good for us. And we would actually, if I were to ask some people today, you would probably say, I'm actually not that hungry for the things of God. And I'd like to submit that you're more hungry than you think you are. That sometimes you just don't know how hungry you are. And that once you start to replace what you've been putting into your body, so to speak, and start the habit of putting the right things in, you are going to find that you are actually hungry for the things of God and you didn't even know it. There's a daily routine. There's daily disciplines. There's a foundation of routine that the exceptional is built on. Matthew 6 verse 11 says this, and you guys have read this before. Give us today our what? Daily bread. Luke 9:23. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross every month. Take up their cross every quarter. Take up their cross daily and follow me. It's this thing, man, I know. And man, you want us to just kind of just preach on, Pastor, can we preach on the deep stuff? God, this is the deep stuff. Like something daily, something like relationship with Jesus, that it's not like, hey, I'll see you next Sunday. But man, on Tuesday and Thursday as well. It's daily. For some reason, Jesus thought it would be important to take up your cross daily. For some reason, Jesus thought it was important that you would eat the daily bread. Here's just for today, as we start, and next week we're going to dive into some specifics. But today, the message is it's just called, it's not complicated. Anybody want something complicated this morning or simple? There's a song I used to like called The Beauty of Simplicity. Man, I just want to hopefully I can just give you something simple, but challenge you with the depth of God's word. Here's the thought today. Spiritual disciplines built upon the foundation of love for God will produce a growing relationship with God. And it has to be built on love for God. There are actually people that have spiritual disciplines in place that aren't going to heaven. There are people that, for some weird religious thought, I mean, the Pharisees in the Bible are a good example. There are people that get in habits and routines, and yet it's not built on passion and love for God, it's built on something else. Built on trying to prove something, built on trying to attain something, built on whatever it might be built on. And my encouragement for us to start off right here with the foundation is, could maybe the disciplines be built on a foundation of love? On a foundation that says, I just love you, and I want to grow in my love for you, and so I'm going to do something regularly to increase that love and that passion. for you. We, Becky and I have some pastor friends of ours that are over in the Michigan, Ohio area. And I remember years ago, we were somewhere at a conference or whatever, and they said, hey, we've got just some simple marriage advice for you. We're like, all right, bring it. I mean, they're well older than us, and so you sit and you're like, all right, how have you done this? And they said 4 things. They said, talk daily, pray nightly, date weekly, vacation periodically. How many know, like, that's super spiritual right there? Talk daily. In fact, talk daily was so important to them and they did it so regularly that even as their kids grew up and went out of the house, the kids would call home and they'd realize, oh, wait a minute, this is your talk daily time. We'll call back later. It became such a routine that they would talk daily. They would pray nightly. Didn't have to be these like calling down fire from heaven prayers, but it was just like 3 minutes. Lord, God bless my wife. Like whatever it might be, like pray nightly, get it in, make the routine. Talk daily, pray nightly, date weekly. I mean, it doesn't have to be these like expensive things, but it can be like we're setting aside a time and our kids are asleep finally, and we're looking at each other. All right. It's you and me, babe. I might have seen that going differently in my head just now. And then vacation periodically. That there's time where we plan that we're gonna have some exceptional moments that we plan towards, and it's gonna be incredible. And I have found that they're 4 little phrases to just help our marriage, like it actually helps my walk with God too. The daily routine and the planning for the big moments. Psalm 27, verse 8. I like it in the New King James. And this is David. He says, when you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek. I love this verse because it was like a command from the Lord, seek my face. But it was a response of David's heart that says, your face I'll seek. I mean, that's what he's looking for. He's not looking for seek my face and you're like, oh, fine. I'll do it. God. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you say. He's looking for more than just an obedience from you. He's looking for a heart that's ignited saying, like, I just love you. Like, I want to do whatever you tell me to do because I love you. And when you say, seek my face, my heart is going to say, your face, Lord, I will seek. The foundation of love. This is where it all starts, the foundation of love. In Matthew 22, Jesus was actually talking to those religious leaders who on the outside looked like they had it all together. And that's why when I look across this room, like I don't know. I mean, some of you look like you have it all together, just to be honest. And I don't know, and Jesus knows. And so Jesus was talking to these religious people that looked like they had it all together. And this is the exchange in Matthew 22, verse 36. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And mind you, they're trying to stump him. They're trying to set Jesus up. And he says, this is what Jesus replied. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. He said, this is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang. Am I still here? I think I'm gone. All right. Am I back on? Hello? I'm good. Yeah? Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me now. I'm not on? So, is the volume up on that? I don't know. I mean, it's a really good place. You can hear me. Just talk loud. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. It says, all the law and all the prophets hang on these two commands. In other words, Jesus was saying that all of the religious stuff in the Old Testament, all of the things that the requirements, all the do's and the don'ts, that they were actually rested on two commands: to love. I love you. And it's like, if you love me, if you focus on heart and passion and love, all of these other things are going to work itself out. In fact, Jesus says that you can sum up the whole Bible on those two commands, the foundation of love. Here's the second thing, is love, and then it's more than feelings. How many of you know that love has to be more than feelings love? Like, I remember times, like when we were dating, and there was like, where in fact, I remember saying, like, how fast are you married? Like, when's the wedding date? And she wanted a outdoor wedding, so it couldn't happen in the winter. I'm like, oh man, like, let's, was it? Yeah, come on. I already feel that. Man. Thank you, Natalie. And so we would have, we're setting this date, and I'm like, let's get married in 2 months. And she's like, it's going to be winter outside. I want to have outdoor pictures. And I'm like, man, I had these feelings, love, that's trying to speed this thing up. And then, man, you fast forward to some hard places in life with loss of babies and all of these other things. And there were times when that feelings, love, wasn't there, that we had to choose, that in the midst of hard times, in the midst of things, we're going to choose to love each other. We're going to choose to love each other through it. I look at this relationship with the Lord. Can I just be honest? I don't wake up with like supernatural feelings every day. Like, I don't like get out of bed all the time with like the ooey gooey, warm, fuzzy, like goosebumps that sometimes we have in a worship service like this. And that there are some times in my walk with God when I have to say, just to be honest, I don't have the feelings part right now, but I'm choosing love. I'm choosing the word commitment. That I am for you just like I am for my wife every day, even when the emotions aren't there. And it's the reason why Hollywood talks about falling in love and falling out of love and all of this stuff. And it's because they're trying to describe the feelings you have when you make the commitment. But there's also those feelings when you're trying to keep the commitment. When we go to get married, and some of you, you're heading towards marriage. Some of you have been married a long time. Some of you remember the words in the ceremony. It's these vows. There's a word called devoted, and it actually, in the root, you get the word vow from. In fact, devoted actually means to vow. And when we come to these ceremonies, that's why the vows sound like, I will love you when you get sick, and when you get poor, and when you make my life worse. Right? You ever seen some of these vows? Maybe you made them. I will love you when you get sick. I will love you when you get poor, and when you make my life worse. That's basically what we're saying. We're saying in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, till death do us part, I'll love you with every beat of my heart. Thanks. There you go. Got it. In marriage counseling, and some of you have been through marriage counseling, some of you met with me, but this is one thing I hear is the spouse often says, my life is worse now that I'm married. Have you ever felt that or heard that? My life is worse now that I'm married. To which I respond, guess what? That's what you signed up for. Because you said,
Even if my life gets worse, I will still love you. I will still stay married to you. For better or for what? Worse. Yeah. And Jesus is asking us for commitment. How many know it's like 100 million times better than that? And he's asking us for a commitment, a all-in commitment, a nothing held back commitment. John 14:15, he says this, if you love me, keep my commands. And I think sometimes we read a verse like that and we're thinking, man, is this just like coming from an insecure person saying, well, if you love me, you're going to do everything I say? Any of you like you're repulsed by comments like that from a person in life? If you love me, you're going to do what I say. How many know that that's not Jesus' heart with this? He's actually saying all of this stuff, like obeying these and doing these things are actually a sign. It actually shows your love for me. The way your love grows is you make a commitment and you keep a commitment. I love what Robert Morris says. He says, you will never understand the depths of love until you learn to keep your commitment. And maybe you have broken commitments in your past. Maybe you have broken commitments with the Lord. Maybe there's been incredible seasons and terrible seasons with God. Maybe you're in a great season. Maybe you're in a terrible season right now. And re-up, recommit. I love some of the places like in the Psalms where it's not focusing on your feelings and emotions. It's focusing on a choice like this. Psalm 145 verse 2, it says, every day I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. Like the places where it says, soul, praise God. In other words, he's bypassing emotion. He's bypassing all this stuff. And he's saying, I will make a choice to lift my eyes up to the heavens and worship him. Or Psalm 34, verse 1. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. There's a story. I don't know if you've heard of a man in history called Ivan the Great. Ivan the Great was a czar of all of Russia during the 15th century, and Ivan, he brought together all of the warring tribes into one vast empire that was actually eventually called the Soviet Union. In 15th century, all this was happening, and as a fighting man, Ivan was courageous, and as a general, he was brilliant, and this guy was conquering the known world at the time, right? And so this guy was he was incredible. But the one thing was he was so busy waging his campaigns that he didn't have a family. Didn't have a wife. And his friends and advisors got concerned because they felt like, and rightfully so, that he needed to have an heir to pass on. If he were to ever die, there needed to be an heir to continue on the throne. And so they would remind him of that, and he would basically just say, listen, I don't have the time to go and pursue a relationship and to have a wife and start a family. He's like, but you guys are more than welcome to go and find somebody for me. True story. So he gave them permission. Would you just go and search for a spouse? I mean, at some level, that takes some of the stress off of it, right? Just you go find someone for me, I'll marry him. And so they did. So they looked all throughout Europe, and they were looking at all the different known capitals of Europe at the time. And finally, they came to one place, and they actually found a woman who was the daughter of the king of Greece. And in their estimation, she was beautiful. She had dark eyes. She was young, brilliant, and charming and all of these things, and they thought this should be the wife of Ivan the Great. And so they told him about her, and he says, yes, that's fine, I'll marry her. Sight unseen, by the way. And the only stipulation, the king of Greece was delighted. All the political advancements, being able to align himself with the czar and all of this, I mean, it was going to be a good transaction, but the only thing the king of Greece requested was that Ivan would become part of the Greek Orthodox Church. And so that was the stipulation, and Ivan basically said, I will do it. That's fine. No problem. I will do it. So a priest was actually dispatched to Moscow to instruct Ivan in all of the Greek Orthodox tradition, the catechism, all of these types of things. In fact, it was kind of a crash course, but Ivan was a fast learner. All of this stuff, he got it, and then they set up a time for him to be able to go then to Greece, to Athens, and be baptized into the Greek Orthodox Church. And so Ivan took 500 of his most loyal soldiers, and they all went on this journey to Athens. And so they got there, the 500 soldiers, and Ivan, he got baptized. In their tradition, it was a baptism by immersion. And so Ivan gets baptized, and all of his loyal soldiers, they said, well, we want to be baptized too. And so the leader of the Orthodox Church at that time, basically they decided, well, we're going to assign one priest to each of you. So they had 500 priests to 500 soldiers, and they had one-on-one crash course in the catechism and all of these things, so that they could understand Greek Orthodoxy and then get baptized. So that was what was going on. And so 500 priests, 500 soldiers, and the crowds were gathering for this baptism because it was going to be a mass baptism in the Mediterranean. And so they're getting ready, and you can imagine the sight, the priests with their black robes and their tall hats, and the soldiers coming in their military gear and their weapons of war and all of this. And then suddenly there was a problem because the church prohibited professional soldiers from being members of the church. They would have to give up their commitment to bloodshed. They could not be killers and church members too. Ruh-roh. So they're all ready. They've gone through the process. They're standing there. I'm imagining on the beach, 1,000 people, and then not including the whole crowd. And they're starting the diplomacy. They're starting to figure out, well, what can we do here? We've come this far. And so in all of the diplomacy, the problem was resolved quite simply. As the words were spoken and the priest began to baptize the soldiers, each soldier reached to his side, withdrew his sword, lifting it high overhead, and every soldier was totally immersed except for their arm and their weapon. It's actually a historical fact. In fact, the story is called the unbaptized arm. Everything baptized except for the arm, which brings us to today. How many unbaptized arms do we have? In other words, are we mostly in and holding something back? Are we mostly 95, 99% all in, but there's something we're holding back? And I come back to this place of spiritual disciplines and what we want to do this year and how we want to grow with our walk with God and be more hungry for the Lord. And I come back to this place, and instead of the overwhelming picture of trying to be an awesome, on fire for God Christian, what's the one thing? Maybe what's the unbaptized arm? What's the one thing to just point the needle forward? And over the next few weeks, we're gonna talk about prayer. We're gonna talk about reading in the Word. We're gonna talk about, I consider it a spiritual discipline to be in community with people, especially in our culture. Like sometimes we want to just be so private and so isolated. I mean, I know people that mostly like their spiritual experience. I'm not shooting this at anybody online, but they're comfortable with their spiritual experience just being church on TV or church online and not community. I'll tell you, man, you're going to start to see that there are some things that if you are intentional with it, you add them into your life as daily, weekly routines, you will cultivate a hunger for God like never before. What's the one thing? Lord, all over this place, Lord, I just ask that you would start to stir something up in individuals and families in this church, that we would look back even weeks from now and start to say, man, that's when you started to ignite a hunger, a passion, a fire for you. Lord, would you cultivate something? Lord, even beyond what we can do in our own strength with spiritual disciplines, Lord, would you see that and match it with something even greater? A passion, a fire, Lord, when you say in your word to even breathe on those coals, to fan into flame the gifts that are in us, the laying on of hands. Lord, would you do that? Lord, I thank you in advance for what you're going to do in this church, in individuals and families. And it's because of Jesus we pray. Amen. 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 Becky, I was going to call you Pastor Becky. I can someday. She's on her way. She's taking school right now to become a pastor. Isn't that cool? That's awesome. Pastor Becky. Would you lead us in a song as they're coming? If you need prayer for anything, in fact, maybe as I shared today, you'd look at your life and you just say, man, I want that. I'm not there yet. And that's a great, honest place to be. And there's going to be people up here wanting to pray. You can come and find me. Man, there is no guilt, shame, and condemnation from this pulpit. There's a place of love and honesty, and each of us on our journey, we're going to find ourselves in seasons where we're more hungry and seasons where we're less. And we would love to partner with you, to pray with you. If you say, Pastor Jonathan, I want to ignite something. I want to go to the next level. And so come up here in just a few minutes, and we'd love to pray with you. Thank you.